Hi, everyone, and welcome to Catalysts for Change, the show where we explore the stories, strategies, and turning points of leaders driving meaningful impact in their communities and across the country. I'm Adam Lister, and I'm so glad you're here. Most of us are taught to measure success by stability, a good job, a growing business, security for the future. But what if real leadership means walking away from comfort, even when everything looks successful on the outside? That's the story of Sam Davidson. Twice, Sam stepped away from stability, first from a rising corporate role in his early 20s, and later from a thriving company he co-founded. Both times, he chose purpose over comfort. Today, as CEO of the Nashville Entrepreneur Center, Sam helps hundreds of founders wrestle with the same questions he's faced. When do you stay the course? And when is it time to pivot? And how do you embed service and community into the very strategy of a business? In this conversation, we'll explore Sam's journey from social entrepreneurship to scaling a national business to leading Nashville's startup hub, and the lessons he's learned about courageous leadership, discerning the right path, and building companies rooted in purpose. Let's dive in. Sam, thank you for being here today. It's a pleasure to be in your home base recording this at the Nashville Entrepreneur Center while talking about the Nashville Entrepreneur Center. So thank you for taking the long walk down the hall to be with us. You didn't even have to let your coffee cool.
No, that's right. Yeah. Thanks, Adam, for the invite. Happy to be here and happy that you're here.
Yeah, thank you. It's for anyone that has not been in this building or taken advantage of the facilities here, quick plug, you absolutely should. I joined as a member over the summer and have been blown away by both the accessibility and just the opportunities that are available here from a connection perspective to just the ability to come in and work and have access to really top-notch facilities. So I think that shows up in a lot of the things that we'll talk about later and how important those connections and community are in your work. But I want to start by asking you to talk a little bit about what formed your ethos around leadership. You grew up here in Nashville, moved here with your family, similar to me at the age of 8. Growing up here, I'm curious, what examples of leadership or service really shaped your perspective that you would carry into your career as you continue to grow? I
think, and some of this I didn't realize until later in life, number one, but really I would say even over the last, 5 to 7 years. But for me, leadership, you cannot be a leader with no followers. And so therefore leadership itself is rooted in community first and foremost. And so who else you are around and the people you're around. For me early on, that's like a lot of us, those of us who were fortunate enough and was in the home, was in the family. My mom was and still is a great example of a servant leader, one who always thinks of others first. My dad also a very kind person. And so being very close and seeing those examples, I grew up going to church. And so saw a lot of examples of leadership there. And when I was about 15, 16, that was where I got a real taste of what leadership could look like, both at church, at school, on the baseball team, kind of all these things that were sort of just built in. But again, in my community, things I was around or a part of every day where someone else, again, community, saw something in me, gave me a chance, see if I liked it, if I would be good at it, if I had any talent for it. And was me, saying yes or saying, okay, I'll try. I'm not sure if I'll be great. But getting a chance to lead in some of those scenarios, baseball, school, home, church. And so just sort of giving that a shot was my first taste of that as a high schooler.
I think having the opportunity to have wide exposure, as you've talked about, is so critical. And as you're kind of ticking off your list, I'm going through, yep, that was it. I had the same experience, And those moments when I was a child being tasked, or a young adult, maybe I should say, being tasked to also assume leadership responsibilities were some of the most formative. Obviously, there was a space around us where we wouldn't fail spectacularly, but they were formative in how you think about leading people and doing something that matters. At 23, you did the opposite of what most newly minted in the workforce, kind of nascent in their career, folks might think about. And you walked away from a promising corporate career where you were already having some early signs of success. What made you choose to take that step, really leaning into that purpose over stability?
Yeah. So when I finished college, I moved back to Nashville, and I had one skill on my resume, and that was based on my college part-time job as at my college campus, setting up microphones for chapel services, weddings, things like that. So I'd acquired this very, very basic audiovisual skill. The Marriott by the Nashville airport was hiring for an audiovisual technician. And I said, "Why? I don't want to work at an airport." I thought at the time I wanted to work in nonprofit and education, and something, again, that we typically associate with making some kind of difference. But I said, well, look, I need a job, so let's just see. So walked in there, surprise of all surprises, they called me back and went and interviewed and ended up getting the job. And yeah, it was at this very corporate hotel that had a bunch of corporate meetings and 14 different meeting rooms. My job was to take the orders, the banquet orders they were called, and set up the audiovisual section. So it was 2 mics in this room, screen, projector, whatever, set them up, get there at 5 a.m., set them up, and then go back to my office and sit there with my walkie-talkie and wait until something broke. And hey, we need you in conference room B. The mic's not working. Okay, I need a new battery. Go. And so I would do that. And that was that prospect. Hey, paycheck's great, but it was sort of like, this is what I'm doing, man. Here I am, college graduate. And I used the downtime because that while I was, quote, sitting in your office waiting for it to break, I was applying to jobs. And I was like, there's got to be a nonprofit that sees the value in me, my history major, and certainly there'll be a chance for me to go make a difference. I'll be out of here at some point. It took me about 2 full years before I got a chance to do that. And during that time, I was so thankful, am now so thankful, because I took one business class in college. Macroeconomics, got a C-, thought I'd never do anything in business. Entrepreneurship, not on my radar at all. And so while at Marriott, largest hotel company still in the world, I learned what a P&L was, how to hire, how to fire, customer service, sales. I learned all those skills. And so went through Marriott's leadership training program. They flew me out for a week and did that again at a young age, promoted twice in that time. So when I quit, my director of operations, he said to me straight, because you're crazy. He was like, the trajectory you're on, you can make an expletive ton of money. What are you doing? And I just looked at him and I said, that's not my goal. And that was his goal. He started at 18 and had all kinds of success, was making a lot of money, but it just wasn't my goal. And so finally got a chance to go do something. And the decision, a long way of answering your question, the decision was, well, if I'm having that much successful, I can come back to this if I have to. I finally had that like fallback. But I don't want to be in that guy's seat in 15, 20 years thinking, why didn't I leave when I was in my 20s and go try that thing, whether it was going to work or not? And so it was that courage, I guess, or lunacy, one of the two, that allowed me to say, well, we'll try it. And if it doesn't work, they need microphone guys all day long. I'll come right back in here and be off to the races again.
Yeah, the conventions don't stop,
and they're
especially
still
in
going.
Nashville.
That's right.
It's clear to anyone that has followed your career, and you've talked a lot about your experiences in the past and in other places, that you weren't trying to follow the typical trajectory of promotion, title, salary, 401k, retirement, those sorts of things, but that you were trying to build something that mattered, and that the businesses that you were involved in had purpose, and that was fueling the work that you were doing. But I want to go back to some of the earliest stages of that transition, where you were moving out of the corporate space into a purpose-driven focus. What was the mission behind Cool People Care? And what did that teach you about connecting both people to purpose, and then also finding the ability to make a living out of it?
I left Marriott, and one of the first jobs I got in the nonprofit sector was with Oasis Center here in Nashville. Great organization, helping youth grow, thrive, succeed through a lot of different programs, from crisis counseling to leadership development. I was running one of the leadership development programs. There I met a guy named Stephen Mosley, who's still a friend to this day. And Stephen and I were just talking about, yes, the young people we were seeing and helping become leaders, but we were also noticing a couple of other things were happening. This was 2006 at the time. And so number one, one, your first group of millennials were graduating college. That was significant because they were the first generation of college students that had volunteerism programmed for them. So this is about the time when colleges, even some high schools, institute an office of community service or service-based requirements for scholarships or different clubs. So this group graduates college and they say, okay, now where is the office of community service? Who is pointing me in these directions? Corporates weren't doing it quite yet. That is coupled with 2006, this thing called MySpace that was taking the world by storm. This thing called Facebook that at the time was just for college students. So Twitter didn't exist, Instagram didn't exist. YouTube launched that same year as well. And so you had this new kind of media, social networking, and young people were on it. Nonprofits weren't. So Steve and I had several conversations. We said, man, here's young people who want to make a difference. Here's organizations like ours that need them, but they're not finding each other. So what if we built a platform they could find each other? And so we had seen this phrase when I was in DC. Somebody had a sign that said, "Cool people care." And I was like, yeah, they do. That's what makes you cool, man. Just care about something. I don't care if it's clean water. I don't care if it's affordable housing, but just care. And so we thought, man, could we use some of these new tools, online blogging and networking, to attract young people? And we'll do it through bite-sized content. So our gimmick was a daily article every single day of the week, 7 days, called 5 Minutes of Caring. So it was going to be one actionable thing you could do to make a difference in less than 5 minutes. And it was 99 words on the dot. And that's how we got people in. While they were there, we had a volunteer calendar. Nonprofits could advertise against it. These ways to sort of build this platform where the two could connect. And we started a business kind of by accident, just really wanting to do this. And it was in that moment when we were starting and growing that where I was like, I don't know what this is, but this is what I want to do. And this being entrepreneurship, not necessarily running that same company, but just taking an idea, seeing a problem and saying, let's try it, try to fix it, see what we can do. And our answer was this company. Then we were kind of off on a whirlwind ride, got covered a lot by local media, grew our audience base to over 30,000 subscribers, mentioned in several articles, had a volunteer calendar. I think we ended up with like 23 different cities, reaching nonprofits. And that grew into where folks would then ask us like, yeah, I know we can be a message on your platform, but like teach us how to talk like that, meaning how to leverage these other tools that were quickly gaining popularity to reach especially young people, but really anybody. And so again, it was in those moments that we just saw that our job really was just how do we bring these things together? For us, it happened to be young people and causes.
And one of the causes that you were involved in was climate change and education advocacy around that work, including bringing teens together on a platform around, and I believe it was titled Inconvenient Youth.
That's right.
What did you learn about empowering particularly young people in that way, going from a place where you were thinking about the platform to actually being in a role where your responsibility or your kind of MOS for the day was to engage and activate young people into something that mattered? Again,
opportunity. In that, at the time, that was when Cool People Care was kind of growing as Al Gore, post vice presidency, had launched really into his Inconvenient Truth brand and workshop and education. And so he wanted to set up an Inconvenient Youth level of that. And so I was able to go slide into that and help them develop that brand, build that platform to really attract and gather and organize young people, because that was who this issue was going to affect the most long term. And so that was fun to bring what I had learned in the few years up to that point that we were running Cool People Care, also leveraging all of these other platforms, again, that were growing in popularity. By the time I stepped into that role there with the Climate Project, Facebook had been open to sort of anybody. There were the new tools at that point. And so it was an exciting time to say, okay, new tools, new media that young people are absolutely flocking to, an issue and consciousness that was also off the charts, because there's lots we could talk about in terms of some of the downsides or detriments of this technology and attention that it's grabbing from us. But hopefully that upside is we can know about more opportunities to care, to get back more easily than ever before. And so that was fun because it was an established brand and organization versus starting up my own thing from scratch. It was starting something within an organization. And so I got to really experience then what we now refer to as intrapreneurship instead of entrepreneurship, where I'm inside of something with some resources, but leveraging a couple of things that already exist. That case being capital, but also a brand, a community. And so that was a fun experience. And again, I could never have planned, but just the opportunity arose and we said, well, let's see if we can go make a difference here too.
You talked about making that change at Oasis and Cool People Care, and realizing that level of entrepreneurship and purpose was something you wanted to do. I'm also curious, what was it about those experiences that helped you understand and kind of laid the foundation for your ability to make these decisions on when to pivot in your leadership, and how you discerned when was the right moment to make those changes?
For a business, and I would say this even for an individual, and it's I'm a big fan of letting your customers lead you. Now, sometimes your customers may want to lead you off a cliff, but you do have some parameters here. But in general, I've seen that when customers raise their hand and say, "Hey, if you did this, I might do this." And again, you want to make sure their part to run a successful business does need a revenue component usually. Here's the example. Cool People Care, as time goes on, nonprofits themselves, instead of only leveraging seeing our platform to connect with young people, they're like, I can set up a Facebook profile too. I can get on and have a voice, and I can blog on my side, and I can create video. And that was awesome. And a lot of our work, my second company I started was a branding agency that was helping organizations think about that and do that on their own. But people loved this 5 minutes of caring daily article. We wrote a book that compiled, 2 books actually, that compiled those that folks bought. And then people said, love the name, the mission, the logo, just want to support you guys. Do you have t-shirts? And we said, no. Would you buy one if we made it? And they said, yes. And we ended up starting an e-commerce company as part of Cool People Care, because that's how folks wanted to support us. And good, because it was harder and harder to sell advertising, CPM, cost per million impressions or per click, on your own platform as Google was building its empire. And so it ended up being great because our customers said, yeah, if you do this, we'll do this. And so it worked for us to do that. I think the same can be said of any individual's career, where someone says, hey, would you do this for me? Now, again, the danger is you become jack of all trades, master of none. And then you end up, nobody knows what you're great at and wants to hire you. But if you see that something starts to rhyme, or somebody says, gosh, I really wish I had somebody who does strategic planning, can help with fundraising, can go speak about this, at least pay attention to it. I'm not saying you have to race after that, whether it's somebody asking you as an individual or somebody asking your company, if you do this, run the models, really think about it. For us, it wasn't going to be hard at Cool People Care to go from running a platform to producing merchandise. So we had some internal skills, some design and things like that. We thought we could get it out there. So it made sense. But I think for me, for the individual, it's like, I see that, let's go give that a shot. And that's how I've treated entrepreneurship, and the opportunities to start subsequent companies seems to be a problem. I think I have a solution for it. Let me try.
Yeah, that resonates a lot. When I was leading a nonprofit, I would regularly ask our partners and stakeholders what they thought we were good at, and would check that against what I thought we were good at.
Good.
And, it's just, I think we're good at this thing. Do you think we're good at this thing? But similar to your point, there were also an opportunity to regularly think about how we could innovate in our work and stay ahead of that curve. But the risk there was, were we innovating in a way that maybe our stakeholders or our funders weren't ready to innovate? And what was how do we get there? We didn't want to get too far ahead of them. But I went through a very similar exercise when I launched 112 Strategies. I sat down and took as many people to coffee as I possibly could and said, no strings attached, what would you hire me to do?
Great.
And my hope was that I would get answers that were aligned with what I wanted to do and what I felt like I was good at, and then what I was actually good at. And hopefully those things were all aligned. With some variations, there were some opportunities that said, oh, that's a thing that I hadn't thought about exploring. I should think about that a little bit more. Outside of the Nashville Entrepreneur Center, you're probably most well known in this city and across the state for a company you started called Batch. Those early lessons that we talked about around service and empowerment came with you to this new venture, where you scaled a business entirely around community. As a customer, one of my favorite things was being able to discover lots of other products that I wouldn't have come to find probably on my own. Full disclosure, Batch was a consistent Christmas gift to every out-of-state family member we had, because it was a good way to showcase our city and showcase some really great products. What was your vision when you launched Batch beyond just creating another subscription box?
Well, that's exactly what you said, sending it to folks out of town. That was the original. It wasn't quite the aha moment yet, but that was the original. Christmas of 2012, I wanted to send a Nashville themed gift set to friends in Denver who were talking about how much they love Nashville and love coming here. And I couldn't find one. Couldn't find one that was the stuff I wanted to send. Local chocolate, coffee, etc. So spent half a day running around town, finding a box, waiting in line at the post office. I was like, why is nobody doing this? A couple months later, talking with two friends and just thinking, is there something here? The conversation also was wrapped around the Music City Center, Nashville's main convention center, was opening up. I was like, man, there's going to be a new kind of tourist coming here. Big conventions, probably higher net worth income. They may want to buy some of this stuff that we love. We love going to the farmer's market and discover, oh, new vendor. Who's this? They got a table here this week. But we also knew it was hard because if you couldn't make it, if you're out of town that Saturday or they weren't there that week, then you missed an opportunity. And so the first idea concept was like, we should open a store. And then you do some math real fast and leases and staff and inventory. It's like, we don't have that. But subscription boxes were popular at the time. Dollar Shave Club, Birchbox. So we said, well, let's try that. And we thought it was going to be we thought you were going to be our number one customer, the local person who wants it out of convenience, curiosity. They're going to get it delivered and they'll just keep doing it. They're like us. This will be a side hustle. Pack boxes once a month to, our goal was to get to eventually 200 people. That was kind of the back of napkin math we had done on break even, but we were doing other stuff. I was traveling the US speaking. Stephen and Rob, my co-founders, had their own businesses and were working full time. So I was like, we don't need this. This is cool. Why not? Let's just see. We got 200 subscribers our first month. And of those 200, because I thought it was really cool. I still love when you can shop somewhere and add a note, and not just the printed generic, it's on the order slip. I get the efficiency of that. But when it's really like thoughtfully done, so we said, we're going to handwrite notes. 80% of those 200 needed handwritten notes.
Wow.
And so that meant it wasn't going to somebody here. Or if it wasn't going to the person who bought it. And so those first boxes go out and I wake up the week of Labor Day. They started hitting, and then we were mentioned in a couple local digital and print media. I wake up and there's 600 orders that had come through overnight. And I said, well, that's more than 200. I told you I took macroeconomics in college. And we immediately had to decide, like, is this a company now? Mm-hmm. Do we really want to do this? And we then got to 1,000. We had to cut off orders just because we didn't know if our vendors could make that much. But again, where your customers lead you, people were adding notes. Hey, miss you. Can't wait to see you at Christmas. Thanks for the referral. Congrats on the new home. And so we realized like, oh, this is not a subscription company. This is a gift company. And so although we sold subscriptions still for several years after that, quickly, as soon as that first Christmas hit, we weren't even a full year old, gift orders were outpacing subscription orders. And so then we had a chance to say, okay, but the stuff was the same: gourmet, locally made, artisan, Nashville pride, all that stuff was the same. And so we just were changing the frequency is all we were changing in terms of, instead of saying, yep, for that price, I'll send this out 3 times, once each month. It was, we'll send this thing once, which is way better for margins, but still the same thoughtfulness and the same connecting. We thought we were going to connect the consumer, you, with the producer, the stuff. We ended up connecting you, the consumer, with your best friend, with your kid who's at college, with somebody who's important to you. And so that's who we ended up connecting. And the vehicle was the box. That wasn't the thing we were ended up being connected. It was the connector.
So interesting. As the company continues to grow, I mean, challenges from the beginning, right? 200 to 600, great, lots of challenges. It kind of makes me think about every single company that crashes the day that their right. Shark Tank episode airs. Sure. What scaling pains related to that work, but also as you continued to grow and moved into the pandemic began to show up? And how did you think about whether or not we double down on this work or change course?
So initially, we sold 200. We go to Stephen's church basement. So where he was on the board of directors, trustees, deacons, whatever it's called. Because they were like, yeah, they got space. It's a Tuesday. We can bring in the products and the boxes, and the 3 of us will pack them. We realized real quick. So the first thing was we thought, again, on our back of napkin math, that these things would cost via the Postal Service like $5 or $6 to ship. But the thing about working with small vendor artisans is they don't make sample sizes like, big mascara companies or shaving cream or whatever. So
you got the full size Snicker.
Full size.
Yeah.
And that first box weighed, I think, either like 9.5 pounds. And so the post office was like, yeah, that'll be $17. And we're like, we sold this box for $25. And the cost of goods were like 18 of that in the end. And so we ended up half of those first shipments, we each took 33 and ran around town. And so somebody was East Nashville, somebody was West Side, somebody was Germantown, North Nashville. And that was just because we didn't have the money to go give all this to the post office. Even getting the ones we did go to the post office that were going farther away or out of state, like we just like start bringing these into the front of the post office and like, no, we have a back. You guys can, we had no idea. 600, can we pack these in Stephen's Church? Okay, good. We need friends to do this. So immediately those things that were like, we remember we ordered 600 boxes again to ship them out. A semi shows up with a pallet on the back and they're expecting to pull up to a dock to deliver. And we're like, so we hop up in the back of this semi truck and, take off the wrapping and take all the boxes out and assembly line them into the church. Just again, no planning, no business doing that. The next one, we finally get a friend of ours who had a landscape lighting manufacturer warehouse. He lets us set up shop. Then we have a dock and we have tables and now we're like a little more legitimate. But again, these are all community. These are all people we know who are saying, yes, you guys are crazy. Why not give this a shot? But it was in those moments that allowed us. So when we got the first call from a corporate customer, happened to be Vanderbilt, and said, we need 60 boxes. We just had an event. And I thought they were talking about subscriptions. So I was like, sure, give me their address. I said, no, we need 60 boxes here so we can hand them to speakers and sponsors. I was like, oh, what will you pay for that? And they said this. And I said, that's awesome. I'll see you next week with 60 boxes. So then it was like, wait a second, corporates want this. Led to our first Christmas season, full corporate business. And we're really off to the races at that point. So those were those chances to grow, letting customers lead us. A few months after that, not even a full year in operation, customers said, I need gifts today. I can't wait for you to ship it. Do you have a store? So we ended up setting up a store that we called home for 5 years in the Nashville Farmers Market. We knew what was going on there. It was an opportunity, made perfect sense. That ended up growing to be half of our annual revenue, an in-person store. That was the kernel of the idea originally. Didn't think we were able to do it. No experience, no money. We ended up doing it, became half the company. Then the pandemic hit. When the pandemic hit, we closed our store, had to. We could keep open the warehouse portion because we were shipping food, deemed an essential business. And we thought long and hard. We had several conversations of, is this it? Man, this has been a really fun ride for about 7 years. But who's going to blame us? Global pandemic wasn't on my bingo card. It happens. A lot of companies are closing right now. We thought long and hard about it. We had all this inventory that wasn't our store. So we do some deals, hey, you need jam, you don't want to go to the grocery store? Because again, early pandemic, we didn't know what was going on. So we sold through that. Okay. And then we started getting calls from local universities, said, hey, graduation's virtual, we want to send a gift. And by then, several months into the pandemic, companies were like, okay, we'll work from home. We want to send virtual conference instead of in person. Let's send gifts. We got our largest single transaction that year, 2020. It equaled our entire first 6 months of operations when we started the business. And so at that point, companies see what we're doing from outside of Tennessee. They said, hey, my company's working from home. My conference is in Austin. I don't know who does this there. Can you do Austin gifts, Louisville gifts, Chicago gifts? And so then it was this moment, I remember sitting in a warehouse of like, okay, now we're a national company. And so I said, well, we don't have money to do this, to go from shipping 8,000 packages a year to shipping 50,000 boxes a year. We're not set up from a warehouse standpoint, the margins on this. So I said, well, we're going to go raise money. And it was in that fundraise that we ended up finding a buyer, strategic buyer in that process. So again, those stories I share to say, you've got this challenge. You could look at it and be like, we're not set up to do that much or in that way. But if you leverage your community, you've at least got a chance to say, well, maybe we can. And then that shift, that pivot, whether it's adding a store, borrowing a warehouse, moving into your own warehouse, raising money, you might have a way out of it that ends up enlarging things, growing things bigger than you thought. I
am thinking a little bit about just the community and the way in which you brought a lot of people together to build a enormous company relatively quickly as well. And the song that is playing in my head right now is one of my kids' favorites. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together, from the most recent Lion King. And you were able to kind of do both, which is unique. I'm wondering, as you find that strategic buyer, you approached this conversation as let's raise money to do this other thing. you probably didn't walk into it with this expectation of, okay, we're going to go ahead and let go of this business, but you did.
Mm-hmm.
What did that process and selling batch teach you about letting go and stepping into this next chapter?
And look, every situation is unique. I get the chance in this seat, every day, but definitely weekly, if not every day, to talk to entrepreneurs, various points of the journey. Some just starting, some trying and wanting it to end. And so I'm happy to talk about my experience. Again, everybody can navigate it differently. What I've learned from my experience that I might encourage now, you use the word letting go, I think that's great. And at least having that expectation. We ended up selling a majority of the company. Part of the deal, part of what the buyer wanted was that, we're still bought in, still working hard. We loved the brand. We loved what we created. We were going to do that anyway. And that ended up not being the best fit from a value standpoint because we were just looking for capital to keep growing, to keep up with demand and to keep leveraging growing small businesses. We were working with 500 different vendors by the time it ended, and a chance to continue to allow people to connect with each other in a unique way. And so the promise of that was so alluring. Similar to how I walked away from Marriott and was like, I'm not keeping one foot in the door, I'm not moonlighting there every other Saturday, I'm out. I'd probably advise that, or looking back, that could have been the things, hey, you know what? This is something you guys think you can take to the next level. Here you go. I'm happy to do what I need to hand it over to you in its best possible condition, but I'm out. Yep. With the idea of like, if I want to go back to that, I already did it. I know how to do it. I think that could have been a better, more strategic, healthier, pick your adjective, way to do it. And a lot of business owners would be wise to think like that. Otherwise, just raise the money, call it what it is, do a fundraise, give up equity, might keep it a little bit cleaner too. But I think that's a time where the departure, the risk was just a little bit different, and learned a lot through that, and think that saying, hey, that chapter's closed, next. Knowing though that if you need to go back a few pages, you can.
I stepped away from the nonprofit that I had led for almost 9 years in April of 24 to launch the company that I'm in now. And we were in a unique position to have an extremely qualified successor in that role.
Yeah.
When she was hired, we didn't necessarily anticipate that she would be my successor, but it became pretty clear very quickly that she had the ability to do this. And the things that became obvious to me were that she was a lot better at things that I was good at, and was also better at things that I wasn't good at than me. But there was a huge aspect in my mind of what's my responsibility to the organization after you let it go. And I know that this person will almost certainly be successful. Yeah. But at what point do you kind of let your hands off of its future success? And I found the same sort of experience, is that I had to essentially walk out of there on the Friday afternoon that I left, turning in my key and knowing that we've done the best we could do for this organization. And we've identified a spectacular leader. They can articulate a great vision. They've got the skills and ability and willingness to do good work. And we're just going to trust that they can be successful. We put all those things into place, and that person has been successful. They've succeeded in ways that I hadn't, and have actually grown the organization in that year since. So it worked out well, but it was a very difficult thing to just say, how do you let go? But to your point, I think that was the best way. Just say it's in your hands, and you're going to do great.
Well, we see that with founders, with athletes, when they can't give up a certain identity. That's a professional identity. Then they hang on too long, they stay too long, and they're not as good as they once were, or the organization, doesn't benefit from their continued presence. And that takes an amazing amount of hubris and ego to keep staying there. It takes a great amount of leadership, I'll call it, and humility to be able to say, no, it's time to go. And this organization, that's the thing that has always fascinated me about business, for-profit, nonprofit, doesn't matter. And that was always my goal, especially as I grew, was I never wanted any company, and I definitely don't want the Entrepreneur Center to rise and fall with me. That we've got to build an organization, a living, breathing thing that can exist on its own, regardless of the interchangeable parts, starting at the very top. We know that's true of board members. Board members have terms, 3, 6 years, max 2 terms, whatever the bylaws call for. And we expect to rotate and turn through those. Staff can be just different sometimes because somebody can really create a legacy and sometimes they can be there for decades. But at some point, they've got to know that they've got to move on. And hopefully they have created something that's not a cult of personality, that's not based on just the charisma of one person, but it's really about the work being done, the mission, the goal that it's achieving. That's when I think you've really created something valuable. Because lots of people have created lots of valuable companies. And then when they leave, the company disintegrates. And to me, I'm like, well, then that was an extension of who they were. And it really wasn't its own thing. You don't want your kid to be like that. You want your kid to succeed and thrive independent of you. You're going to shepherd them for a period of time and be in their lives as long as you're around. But ultimately, you want them to have their own success based on what they've achieved. And so the same should be true of an organization you birth as well. Yeah,
that's exactly right. You have been recognized as one of the most admired CEOs in Nashville. And you've written about how you simplify and focus on what matters. As you've left Batch and you're serving in this role today, what are the ways in which those values and orientations guide your leadership now that you are fully entrenched in a nonprofit organization, but one that I would argue has a very unique
right.
and mildly awkward purpose of advancing
That's right.
for-profit entities?
That's exactly right. Yeah, I mean, we are in the economic development camp of the realm of nonprofits. That is true, and that's what we do, and that's why, although, we do have folks with nonprofit ideas that can incubate out of here. Several have. We love that too. The thing I take the most with me, and this hit me kind of in the midst of the pandemic when I was working a lot, I was at home with the family a lot, loved the family. I was going to a warehouse a lot with a growing staff that was, in a windowless warehouse most of the day. And what I was missing, though, while I had people around me that I loved and loved me, I was still missing the chance to do this. I was missing the chance to see a buddy in Chicago because we both happened to be there for work. I missed saying, yeah, let's get a coffee. And I realized that those moments combined with rich, deep family moments, combined with work moments, those were all the components of my community. And the reason I'd had any success in life was because of the community. So one thing I say whenever Mike's in front of me is that the height of my success is directly related to the depth of my community. And so that's a thing I discovered again, 2020, 2021, but I've been sharing every chance I can since, is realizing that. Because the opposite's true too. Anytime I've had a failure is because it's when I thought I could do it on my own and didn't need help and had it all figured out. And so the more that I can rely on that, especially stepping into this role. When I stepped into this role 2 years ago, it was the first time in 17 years that I had a job that I didn't create for myself and inherited a team and inherited a brand and all of these great things that existed, and said, okay, how do I lead this? Because yes, I've led people, budget, yep, about the same size, done that before, understand subject matter, entrepreneurship, yep, got it. But still just a different angle than I'd seen before. And community was the first place I went. And so being able to rely and talk to other nonprofit CEOs that, yes, I admired, but that were friends, and to ask them how they manage and communicate with their board and manage their staff. And we instituted new core values, a revised mission statement. And so some of those things we did, and I did very thoughtfully, I think and hope, but also with help and assistance from my community, because I want to do that as successfully as possible.
So community critical. Your orientation to service also has shown up in a lot of ways. What were the ways that you helped to embed that into the core of this organization? And I think about the ways that you communicate with me as a member and with your other members. Put first your community aspect and also the ways in which you can help support the things that we're doing. And that has been universal in my experience with every member of the staff at this organization. Great. How did you embed that into the core of the way that both you lead and your team shows up?
I mean, some of it, a lot of it is talking about it, but some of it is, again, the folks you're talking about, that's who they are. And some of that, I hope that we give them space to be more of who they are. And that's a function of how you hire, who you hire. But a lot of it is bringing the entrepreneur's story to the forefront. We have a very active social media presence. we try not to talk about ourselves a lot, but rather to put the spotlight on our members and the success they're having. Because that's if our entrepreneurs do not succeed, if someone joins and they're like, my business has shrank since I came here, then we need to revisit what we're doing, how we're doing it. So everything is geared toward that first and foremost. Then if we capture that story, because you're having lots of success, you're not sharing with us. That's on us to get that out of you and what you're willing to share and you're willing to let us share. But we know that our entrepreneurs who come through here, we have 300 members right now. We're about to announce, as of this recording, another 100 or so. They're going to go through our fall accelerators. So we're working with a lot of entrepreneurs. Our mission, our strategic plan, by 2027, we want to work with 1,000 a year. And that's so possible because Nashville has so many entrepreneurs. And so to do that, though, we just got to highlight how these businesses are growing. And the small part, we're not the source of all that growth, but we played a small part in it and we're proud to. And so a lot of it is that of okay, what is it that you need in order to grow? And if you need a mentor, if you need a podcast studio, if you need a place to work out of, if you need to learn something, we would just say, letting our customer lead. Great. Let's see if we can provide that.
The nonprofit leaders that are listening to this and others, presumably, it's not exclusively for nonprofit leaders, but often have a mental block in how they think about the differences between a for-profit entity and a nonprofit entity. And they'll tell themselves different stories about we're not as sophisticated as our for-profit partners over here, or we don't have these things over here. We're in a deficit mindset in this space. I fundamentally think that's wrong. Just as a like point of fact.
Yeah.
And would tell any client that I have that we need to think a little bit differently about it. But I'm curious to hear from you what you think highly effective organizations can learn, not just from your experience, but in the experience of your leadership as CEO of the CEO of the Entrepreneur Center. What can help them deepen their impact that may not be supporting other entrepreneurs, but they're in a service-based space and a community-based space that can help them get over that barrier or roadblock of we're just a charity.
I've only read 2 nonprofit management books in my life, I think. I'm sure there's a couple more than that, but 2 that stand out, and none since I've come into this role. Because I think, to me, the only distinction, there's tax classification distinctions, and there's certain benefits in terms of somebody gives you, the system is set up to encourage folks to donate, and the private sector, we call it the individual sector, to donate, and the way they can offset taxes so the government doesn't spend its money on these things, yada, yada, yada. Tax deductible, tax exempt, great. But really all a nonprofit means is that there's no equity ownership so that when there's a surplus, there's no dividends to individuals. The dividends are reinvested in the mission. That's it. We have to pay for the electricity just like every other business. We pay salaries. People have insurance here just like every other business. We collect revenue. Sometimes people just give us money or they don't give a business money for anything if they're not receiving a service, of course. But we still have a large base of members and folks who go through our accelerators and pay tuition, and we've got to market that. So if I hid the names and the tax classification, everything looks like a business. And that's true for most nonprofits, whether they have earned revenue or not. And so why wouldn't you do things excellently? Why wouldn't you have a great sales team? Again, you call them a donor relations team or a growth team or those sorts of things. But you're still trying to convince somebody to part with their money. You're trying to get somebody to swipe a credit card. It's just for a different reason. And what they're putting in their pocket, either something or nothing, a good feeling or a good gadget. So a lot of those things I approach the same way in thinking through how can we do that. The 2 books that I've read, Begging for Change by Robert Egger and Uncharitable by Dan Pallotta, really approach and kind of call out that mentality of, we just have to duct tape these things together. Woe is us. And the need for investment in good tools and good people in order to really carry a mission forward. And we all collectively as a society, not just those who work for a nonprofit or advocate for them, but all of us as a society should want nonprofits to be the absolute best, doing the best research, creating the best economic engines in their community, feeding the most people, fill in the blank. The other difference is ultimately, we all want a world, nonprofits should want a world where they aren't needed. Businesses don't try to do that. They're always trying to create need and demand. Ideally, a nonprofit is not creating new demand. It's meeting the demand that's there and hopefully a shrinking world that needs it. Ideally, if there's a world where entrepreneurial education and advancement is just happening naturally or in schools or part of the curriculum or there's other resources out there that there's just so much happening in society, then great. You don't need a place like the EC. our founders in 2007 thought differently and saw a different landscape. That's what we want. We want there not to be a need for food banks because everybody has enough food every single night when they go home. But right now it's not the case. And so again, that's the only differences I highlight. Otherwise, it's business as usual.
When you describe the EC as a connection engine and talk about it in that way, what do you think that says about your leadership approach?
That is what, it's not unique to me. Entrepreneurship is lonely, but it's not something you have to do alone. And a lot of what we do here, we happen to have a building. And so a lot of connection can happen in our building, but we don't need the building in order to make the connections, because I can say, hey, Adam, who you need to talk to grow is this guy or this gal over here. I'll do an intro on your way. So you still need a person though, who's making those connections. Those connections can be to an investor. They can be to a customer. They can be to your first hire. They can be to, again, a vendor, a key vendor who can help you. Because sometimes that's what we talk about, opportunity knocking, but the only thing that ever knocks is another person. And so really what you're talking about when someone's opportunity, the person is the opportunity. And so the more that we can connect the entrepreneur to the person, then the more opportunities they are going to have, whether that's to make sales or to improve their product or learn something. So that's really at the heart of it. Sometimes it happens serendipitously that, hey, we have today when we're recording this, we have a happy hour this afternoon, the design. Get 100 entrepreneurs in here just to meet one another, and who knows what'll happen, a new partnership, a new sale. And we do that. And then other times we connect you to someone who's leading a lunch and learn seminar. You're going through an accelerator and you get really rich content. You meet a fellow comrade in arms, another entrepreneur, and you commiserate together or celebrate together. Because otherwise, because you can do entrepreneurship just you, it's very tempting to keep it just you. And to do it in your house with all the technological tools we have and sell globally without ever talking to anybody, without ever getting help from somebody. But research shows that the number one thing that's going to help you grow is another person.
I think one of the things that I find so interesting about this organization in particular and how it connects to other nonprofit organizations that are creating impact or driving a deeper impact in their communities is that the entrepreneur mind is at its core solving a problem. And the question in my mind, is it a profit-focused problem or is it a societal-based problem? Yeah. And so you mentioned your two, I shouldn't say two favorite, but the two books that you read about nonprofit management. I take a slightly different approach. I actually think, and my background is in politics and strategic planning and nonprofit management, et cetera, but I often think about microeconomics as the course for understanding nonprofit leadership and entrepreneurship. And I always recommend two separate ones. Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss.
Great book.
And How Clients Buy. And the reason for the first is actually not as a negotiation book. Okay. Because I think the most valuable lesson that comes out of that book is the value of listening and the value of mirroring back to the person you're talking to. And whenever I make that recommendation, folks think, oh my gosh, you must just really love buying used cars. And that's not right. The issue. The important part is, in my view, if you are an effective nonprofit leader, you know better than anybody how to understand at a molecular level what the theory of change is for your donor and how it connects to your work and what their barriers and motivations are to connecting to you directly. And I think that there's a lot of symbiotic objectives with an entrepreneur as well. The question is just, to what end are you driving the answer to those curiosities? When you think about entrepreneurs and you are engaging in supporting them as well as leading a nonprofit organization, how do you think about, or even if you think differently about purpose as part of their business model? And presumably we've got some here that are, I'm going to create, similar to the colleague you had in Marriott, I'm going to create a business that gives me a 7-figure exit or a 10-figure exit or whatever it is. And then others are, I'm going to build a company that connects people. How do you think about those variant purposes with the wide variety of members that you have here?
So we are a purpose-driven species. We're the only entity out in the animal kingdom that thinks about purpose, whether that's moral, whether that's religious, whether that's whatever, other than survival. Every animal wants to just stay alive. But we're the ones that have the time, the luxury, the higher functioning brain that's like, what's the point of all this? And that naturally carries over to work. So according to several polls, Gallup being one of them, 87% of employees want to work with a place that aligns with some kind of purpose. Now, some people, that purpose is make a bunch of money. That's the purpose. That can be a purpose. And if you align with that and your team aligns with that, go make a bunch of money. For most of us, I think most people, we need a little more than that. We want to make money. We want to make a lot of money, probably. Want to do a lot with it, survive, buy nice things, go places. But usually what's going to work to attract people and to keep them bought in is some kind of higher purpose. We recently had a team offsite, and I shared the quote by Antoine Saint-Exupéry that if you want to build boats, don't give somebody a blueprint, but rather teach them to long for the endlessness of the sea. And so, meaning the endlessness of the sea in our world is really caring for all the possibilities that an entrepreneur could have. And whatever your daily duty is, if it's working our front desk and helping people navigate the building, or giving tours, if it's running a specific program, if it's raising money, you're doing all that in the service of this work today is going to help some entrepreneur who comes through our doors achieve the success and the purpose they want. And if folks aren't bought in, if they don't long for that endlessness, I get it. Let's help you find the endlessness that you do long for. Could be another social service, could be in the for-profit sector. Let's do that. But if that's what you long for, then we can all row in the same direction faster. And so I think every business owner, whether you're running a nonprofit or a for-profit, is you've got to have that purpose. We try to tie those into this mission statement and say, believe in this. Usually it's several levels deeper. One thing I share in some talks I give, or we've talked about with the team before, is I ask them to think about the first entrepreneur they ever met. Because usually it's not Elon or Oprah. Usually, for me, it was my grandfather, who was a farmer and had a general store on his pastured farm in northeastern Mississippi, where he shucked and sold pecans in addition to beef and dairy cattle. Like that's Richard Lewis, Papaw, as I call them. That's what entrepreneurship looks like in America. And all of us are tied. It's a neighbor, it was a relative, it was a teacher who was a football coach who also did this. And so when you can get people connected to that, then they're like, that's why I'm going to work today. Is because we're going to have hundreds more people like that. And every once in a while, you're going to get the next thing that goes public and yeah, you're a billionaire and that's good too. But most likely they're going to be somebody who has a great business, supports their family, they're a pillar of their community, they donate to charity, they go on a nice vacation, and then somebody else gets to see that and say, hey, maybe I'll do that one day.
You've made some pivots throughout your career, and folks that might be listening today would say, wow, those were really easy pivots for you to make. Sure. And you navigated those flawlessly.
Yeah, flawlessly.
What advice would you give to leaders wrestling with whether to stay the course or whether to pivot? And how do they navigate that in a way that continues to sustain and build their energy?
Man, there's a lot of ways I could go. I wish I only had one way to do it. I'm gonna give you a couple that worked for me. One is, people call it a different thing, a kitchen cabinet. A friend of mine, Antonio Neves, calls it allies of glory, where you've got some small group of people who really know you and have your best interest at heart. So are unaffiliated with a certain job opportunity. They're not an investor of yours. Could be a relative. But I remember when I was making one of the first leaps, I reached out to 5 guys and I was like, here's what I'm thinking about doing. Am I crazy? And they all were very honest with me. And then, so, they all agreed with the decision I wanted to make. But they weren't, I knew they weren't just going to give me lip service and make me feel good, but they were really concerned. And none of them were family, but it was just people that I trusted to give me their honest opinion. So I would encourage that, number one, regardless of where you are in your career. And those same 5 people I could reach out to now, ask them the same thing if I were thinking about a pivot. I'm not, just for anybody listening, very happy here. But I could reach out to them the same thing if I thought I needed to. That's number one. Number two, we were sort of talking about this earlier, but one of my favorite management quotes is, don't look back, we're not going there. And so I think regardless of when you've made the decision, don't look back. To your point, you walked out the door after 9 years. Here's the keys. I'll be cheering for you. And so I think that piece, I remember a therapist once that I had, was talking to him and said, yeah, sometimes I just wonder if I hadn't have done that. He's don't stop. Stop. Because it doesn't matter. It's totally not a realistic situation now. So now instead, focus energy on where you are. So I think those two things of having that kitchen cabinet, that small group, whatever you want to call it, that'll be 100% honest with you because they care about you. And then number two, just making sure that whatever decision you make, you say, I'm not going back. Because then you've shut that door, burned that bridge, whatever you want to call it, where you are firmly focused on this opportunity. Because that mindset, it's like, I got to make this work. And sometimes it's, I got to make it work because there's no other options. Sometimes it's, I got to make it work because I did not want to go back and show up at a hotel at 5 a.m., 6 days a week and set up microphones. So whatever that reason is, you can't go back, leaning all the way into that, that's usually what makes it work.
Looking ahead, what excites you most about the role of shaping Nashville's entrepreneur future and your own journey?
There's so much possibility. According to the Kauffman Foundation, Nashville indexes at 25% more entrepreneurial than the average American city. So per 100,000 residents, 25% identify as entrepreneurs than most places. So to me, and there were 43,000 new business applications in Nashville filed in 2023. So to me, that's possibility. 43,000 new businesses just 2 years ago, and we have 300 members. So we have 42,700 to go. There's so much opportunity in a city like Nashville. Batch grew because Nashville was growing. And I think that the EC has the same opportunity as new people come to the city, as people already here start businesses. I did it 4 times before I sat in this seat. There's just so much. So to me, that's what's exciting. Number one. I think number two then is also just to capture those stories and share those stories, because we all hear the same stories of entrepreneurial success through major media, things that go viral, but there's so much of just these everyday entrepreneurs who are doing really cool things and that enables them to do really cool things for their community and to be the kind of example citizens that we want and need for Nashville to keep being unique and what it is. So it's so unique to sit in this seat, not just to help entrepreneurs, but to see how this organization helps this city is a really important and lucky place that I get to sit.
Sam, you have said multiple times you believe in connecting people.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to do a quick lightning round with you.
Love lightning round.
To build some connections with the listeners. We are recording this in Nashville, and many of the folks that listen to this podcast are Tennesseans. Mm-hmm. Some not, but will presumably travel to Nashville at some point. So I want to ask you, favorite Nashville spot that I should visit as a Nashvillian, or someone that is visiting from some other community has to be at or see or visit before they leave this town?
So this is, how many of these do we have, by the way? Because this is like, I can make each one really long and say a bunch of stuff. This is like, people have done this and it's like your favorite child, because you're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to say this thing and this person I know is going to get whatever. Because already 2 are coming to mind.
I'm not going to limit you.
I know. Okay, fine. Radnor Lake or the pedestrian bridge. And I'm going to say that because as opposed to like a cool restaurant or place to get a drink, because those 2 places are outdoors and they give 2 different walking perspectives of the city, both of which are true at the same time. Our bustling tourist, steel and concrete downtown, and our protected state park, very rich legacy that we've got here. Both great walks, both well worth it. You might see the same people at each place in the same day.
Yeah, that's a great answer. There's no reason why you would know this, but I actually did my Eagle Scout project at Radnor Lake State
nice.
Park. And it's a really special place.
What if I did know that? I was like, oh no, Adam, I saw it. I know what you're talking about.
Well, you've conducted some very thorough research.
That's right.
Next question. You are coming into Nashville. Mm-hmm. What type of music and what venue is the best match for that particular type of music?
I've always said, just like you can buy like a season tickets to, or like a suite at Bridgestone or, Titan Stadium, I wish you could do that for the Ryman. I wish you could just have a ticket, like whatever it costs. This is to every concert this year at the Ryman, because the Ryman, it's a special building. It's awesome. They've done such a good job telling that story and preserving that history. And they'll have heavy metal one night and bluegrass the next night and opera the next night. And it's such a versatile venue. And every one of those artists is like, oh my God, I'm playing the Ryman tonight.
Yeah, it's so true.
And so to me, that is like the spot to go to. I love So many other local spots. We're part of a crew that does obviously Bluebird Cafe, but then Bluebird in the summer, they have a series called Bluebird on the Mountain up at Dyer Observatory. And so we have a crew that's gone there for several years. You get to see the singer-songwriters at Dyer Observatory outside under the stars. And that's special. So I put that again as I'm not going to give you one answer to any of these, but so I say Dyer Observatory, you can look at the stars, but you can hear some great music there if it's on the right night.
Tribute to another great nonprofit and Nashville landmark. My wife and I's favorite annual date is Cheekwood's Songwriter Night. Which happens periodically throughout the year. Also a wonderful venue outside of Songwriter Night, but another wonderful venue. All right, final question, not Nashville related. And not related to nonprofit management, but what book, podcast, or media artifact do you think is the most valuable for a leader that will shape the way that they think about leading, that teaches mindset or values, not necessarily skill?
The only book I've read more than once, I think, I know, but it's the only one I've read 8 times, is Atomic Habits by James Clear. I read that every January. And that's not a leadership-centric book, but in terms of cultivating the discipline and the habits you need to lead, whether that's lead your family or lead a major organization, there is no second place to that book. So I'd say that from an actual doing the stuff, productivity standpoint. I think from the real work of leadership, Parker Palmer's Let Your Life Speak is up there. That was recommended to me by Hal Cato, who was part of that group of 5 that I've consulted over the years, still a good friend. Just talking about really what should be at the heart of a leader and thinking about caring for other people and translating that into becoming one's life's work. Nothing based on a title. Doesn't matter what title you have, but that's what leadership can look like. I
love so much that your book recommendation was Atomic Habits, and part of that is the habit of reading it.
That's right.
Every single year.
Exactly. Every year.
That's wonderful. Sam, thank you for being here today. Sam Davidson's journey reminds us that leadership isn't always about holding on. Sometimes it's about having the courage to let go. Twice in his career, he walked away from stability because purpose mattered more than comfort. And along the way, he's shown us that embedding service into strategy isn't just good for communities, it's good for building lasting, resilient businesses. If you've enjoyed this episode, please leave a rating and a review and share it with someone you think would find it valuable. To learn more about the Nashville Entrepreneur Center and the work they're doing to make Nashville the ultimate destination for startups, visit ec.co. We've got more amazing guests coming this season, so be sure to subscribe to Catalysts for Change wherever you get your podcasts, or visit us at catalystsforchangepod.com. Thank you again for listening to Catalysts for Change, brought to you in part by the Southern Research Collaborative. Until next time, I'm Adam Lister, and I'll see you soon.